Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome again to our third session of What Does It Take to Be a Disciple? A reflection on Catholic social teachings. Our first gathering, which we had 2 weeks ago, just looked at the what in terms of method of most of the ways that we teach Catholic social teachings with a pastoral spiral, is which I called. And last week, we looked at some practical examples of how it gets played out. So this week, we're going to have a different speaker, my confrere, Father Carl Chudy, and he's going to present to us a whole interfaith view of these teachings, because we as Catholics don't have a monopoly on concern for others. So without further ado, Carl, I'm going to leave it on to you. I'm going to make you the host.
Okay.
Right.
What's that?
There it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Good to be with you all tonight. You know, my screen is covering up the title. Can you guys see the title on your screen?
Yep, it's fine.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So it's just me. All right. Fine. So anyways, I'm thankful to Rocco, who asked me to share with you a little bit around discipleship, and in particular, what that means in the way we Catholics connect meaningfully with folks both within the church, but especially outside of the church. And so the title of, if you could see it, I don't know, my thing is just covering it up, but the title is called Pinpoint Discipleship in a Post-Pandemic World. And I just made up that word, by the way, pinpoint discipleship, because I wanted to share with you a little bit about how I have experienced discipleship and my life as a missionary, and how that happens. And I say in a post-pandemic world, because a lot of the concerns of Pope Francis is about how we proceed as a church in a post-pandemic world, even though that there is a slight uptick on virus counts here and there. I think it's like up 18% in Middlesex County. But generally speaking, that's what it's all about. So, and what I mean by pinpoint discipleship is that our discipleship is about answering, connecting, and engaging with the most deepest, most profound needs of humanity, with people around us, in particular, persons who are next to me and everyone else. So pinpoint discipleship is about saying that discipleship is not an abstract reality, but although there's a theology of discipleship, but that its effects are right here at home with the folks I live with my next door neighbors, with my family, with my community, with the people all around us. And so it's very practical. And this, I guess you could say, is one of the reasons why, and I think Rocco's presentation of the pastoral circle or the pastoral cycle is about a tool to do exactly that. Now, years ago, Rocco and I, when we had long flowing hair, we both worked in the African-American community. And there, in my experience in the African-American community in Chicago, both in the South Side and in the West Side, is that we were looking at the needs of the community there at that time. And one of the needs of the community there at that time was the fact that there was malnutrition rates in the community, and that there were hunger issues in the local community of Chicago. And hunger meaning maybe not enough food, but not enough caloric intake, which is about 2,000 calories a day of the right stuff to eat. And so using the pastoral circle, they looked at their real needs. And in the end, they realized that there was no place to get fresh fruit and vegetables and other types of food in the local community. You had to take 3 buses to go to the supermarket. So, and what you could eat in local community was at the corner store. It was chips and all kinds of things like that. So they used the pastoral circle to look at, well, why are we having these malnutrition rates, if you will? They were mild, and these hunger rates in the local community in the middle of a big city. And of course, being in the African-American community, there's a lot of things that are not accessible to them, like during the pandemic, vaccinations were a problem, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. But it was all about answering practical needs, the deepest, most profound needs. In my personal view, all of ministry and every call is all about that. Every charism of every religious congregation is about answering or engaging with the most deepest, most profound needs of the community around us. And this is, I'm going to share with you these a few needs that came up in our community during the pandemic. I'm using the pandemic as a dividing line because Pope Francis does. And what I'm going to be doing here is sharing with you discipleship through dialogue. And I'm going to be sharing basically from his 3 encyclicals, and that is Joy the Gospel, Laudato Si, or Care for Our Common Home, and Fratelli Tutti, which is in solidarity with our brothers and sisters. These 3 encyclicals, which my personal opinion, every Catholic should read, are probably one of the most powerful ways to understand what it means to be a Catholic disciple in the times we're living in today. So, real needs. This is from Fratelli Tutti. This is what Pope Francis says. Let us dream then as a single human family, as fellow travelers sharing the same flesh, as children of the same earth, which is our common home, each of us bringing the richness of his or her beliefs and convictions, brothers and sisters all. I'm going to be getting into our relationship with peoples of other faiths, but before I do that, I wanted to get into a little bit about what was going on in our community and elsewhere during COVID-19. I mentioned here 3 things: isolation, our dividing lines, which became more pronounced, and extraordinary inequalities. Now, the pandemic did not invent this stuff, but the pandemic amplified and brought it to the surface in living color, if you will. And the first thing had to do, of course, with social distancing, closures, deaths, and illness from COVID. Almost 900,000 Americans perished in the last 2 years because of COVID. Almost 1 million people. It's amazing. And I often wondered why we don't have a national day of mourning for all of our fellow Americans and others who were taken by COVID-19. But the isolation, and you and I know exactly what that's all about. We're still feeling the effects of that isolation, the uptick in anxiety and depression, and the the real difficulties that were caused when our normal support issues and resources, like for example, church, were closed. You see, so and then we had to do everything on Zoom or whatever. So isolation was a big problem, and a huge need during the pandemic was connection and intimacy. The second thing that was a big issue during the pandemic, real needs that came crying out, was the blatant racism and implicit bias, anti-Semitism, Asian hate, and xenophobia. These were dividing lines that became much more pronounced. They were not invented, they didn't just appear during COVID-19, but they became much more pronounced. And in particular, racism issues and the rise of Black Lives Matter out of the killings of brown and Black men and women by the police. When I was back in 2014, one of the first big things about this was in Ferguson, Michigan, Ferguson, Missouri. Sorry. Do you remember that? Anyways, it was in Ferguson, and I was working with the National Advisory Council of the U.S. bishops. And part of my job was to suggest agenda for the plenary assembly of the bishops. And one of the things that came up was the issue of racism. Back in 2014, we had proposed that the bishops look at this issue, even though they spoke about racism a couple of times in the past, but it had taken on a whole new light. Of course, the rise of white nationalism and the Christian roots that were unearthed around racism, anti-Semitism, and the killing of Jews in their synagogues, or the hostage situation, which was the last one in Colleyville in Texas. Asian hate, and because it was dubbed a Chinese invention, COVID, and politicized, Asians were also part of the trauma of COVID as well, and xenophobia, of course. Immigrants, refugees were completely barred, and so on. In all these things, the third area was inequalities. And these inequalities, of course, occurred basically in the distribution of vaccines, in PPE, in the enormous pressure put on our healthcare systems, and so much more. These were problems that raised deep pastoral needs. Now, how do we engage with the needs of humanity? So what I would like to suggest, and what I'm going to be doing in this presentation, is to share with you the view of Pope Francis, which is a very unique and particular view of dialogue, and what he calls, how do we encounter these needs? We create a culture of encounter and dialogue across every border that we prop up amongst ourselves. The Catholic Church cannot be disciples alone. And I think that's one of the first points I want to make here about that as I read from Lumen Gentium. The Catholic Church does not claim a role of superiority or of self-assigned leadership over other faiths and other traditions, and I would add other worldviews. On the contrary, it suggests an attitude of service as an instrument of the unity that characterizes humanity. And this is underlined in Lumen Gentium and Nostra Aetate from Vatican II. Now, basically, the point here is, folks, that we Catholics cannot be disciples alone, that it's not up to the Catholic Church to do it all. So, especially in the times we're living in today, 21st century, that we see ourselves as, first of all, collaborators on the same faith journey with others. And that includes folks who may not be Christian at all. That Pope Francis makes a very specific point that we are all on this faith journey together. And in fact, Benedict brought up the same thing before Pope Francis, that the Catholic Church has to see itself as a collaborator among others. Now, I find, to be quite honest, that there's a certain suggestion in Catholic circles that being a disciple of Christ and engaging with the needs that are all around us are something that are specifically or solely Catholic, or that it's Catholics who are making this conversation with each other, which is a good thing. I'm not saying that's not a bad thing, or saying it is a bad thing. It's not. We do need to engage this with each other as Catholics. But sooner or later, we have to move out beyond ourselves if we want to answer the deepest, most profound needs in our community and in the world around us as well. So I'm gonna kind of work on this word called dialogue. And Saint Pope Paul VI, who in my view receives very little credit for the extraordinary papacy that he lived in the time of the church, when so much upheaval and so much change was going on. And Pope Paul VI was just amazing to me. And in the Catholic tradition today, when we talk about dialogue, encounter, and creating a culture of encounter of dialogue, we are starting from the basis of Pope Paul VI. And it's pretty prophetic in my view that he brings this up in the very first encyclical Ecclesiam Suam, or his church, that he wrote in 1964. Do you remember those days, Nan? 1964? Okay. Diane, do you remember 1964? Okay. I was just a little child, so anyways. Ecclesiam Suam, it's awesome, especially number 70 and following. So at any rate, Paul VI attempts to change the Catholic mentality of the time. And to be quite honest, it's not an easy thing to do. And for the first time in the Catholic world, what I say here, he defined as a new mental attitude which the Catholic Church must adopt regarding the contemporary world. Now, there was no Lumen Gentium yet. It was coming after this. In fact, Lumen Gentium was very much kickstarted by this idea. But Pope Francis talks about this new attitude was dialogue, which he defined more precisely as an internal drive of charity, which seeks expression in the external gift of charity. Another way of saying it, I wish I used a quote of his from 72, but basically saying, we are in dialogue with everything that's out there. And church in the modern world, Lumen Gentium, underlines that fact, that we Catholics, because there are so many changes out there, and by the way, the Catholic Church does not understand all of these changes at all. So particularly in the early 60s, so that we are in dialogue with everything that's out there, with the entire multi-religious, multi-secular world. That's our plane of dialogue, he says. Dialogue with who? Now, Pope Paul VI suggests that the church must enter into dialogue with the world in which it lives. It has something to say, a message to give, and a communication to make. We Catholics have something to say, and I believe that very deeply. But we also have lots to learn. And that requires us to be able to dialogue with the world around us. And I want to suggest 3 areas of the people who we do that with. And these are accentuated by Pope Francis. One, and I'm going to get into this more, other faith communities. That includes, and that comes from our Vatican II heritage in particular, but also a lot of the work of that was done since late 19th century, early 20th century. So faith communities, of course, mean traditional faith communities and our multi-faith neighbors that live in our neighborhoods. In Holliston, we, of course, have 4 Christian churches? Is it 4 Christian churches? Baptist Church, Lutheran Church, Episcopal Church, Catholic Church, and the Shrine, okay? 5 Christian centers in Holliston, this little bitty town. But guess what the largest population in Holliston is? And it's not Christian. It's non-religious. That's the largest population, and I'm saying that based on the research I've done in the past and the demographics of Holliston. The non-religious and those folks who have exited the church or never really entered, are the largest population in Holliston. Now, just a few nights ago, I was in Cambridge at a Muslim iftar, which is a special opportunity to gather with the Muslim community for the breaking of the fast at the end of the day of Ramadan. I was sitting next to a secular Muslim who has disaffiliated from Islam. And we had this fascinating conversation. And I think I comforted him because he thought he was the only one. So I told him, don't worry, there's plenty of them around there. So you're in good company. So that was that. So other faith communities. I mentioned with those who left the church and other peripheries. Now, a lot of you guys already know that I've been doing research in this area, especially with ex-Catholics or former Catholics, and I continue to do so. But I also like to mention also the many other peripheries where the church does not reach or does not reach very adequately. Now, you might say, well, what are those? Well, in 2013, I was invited to a conference that the bishops are putting on in the United States. And it was all based on joy of the gospel. And it was like Vatican III of the USA. 200 bishops were there and about 3,500 Catholic leaders from across the country. And there, the whole conference, all of us going through joy of the gospel together, the whole conference focused on 24 peripheries that the Catholic Church is either not reaching, not connecting with in a very meaningful way, or if so, in a very inadequate way. 24 of them. I'm not going to name them all here, but if you're interested, you can email me later about that. And one of them being, of course, those who have left the church or left religion behind. The other area that Pope Francis in particular is asking us to dialogue with is with secular culture. And he points this out first in Joy of the Gospel. But this is not new. He's just continuing the thought of the church since the time of Vatican II, and especially the document, The Church in the Modern World, Lumen Gentium. So he talks about our outreach to secular culture. And secular culture, of course, would be so many things, because there is a multi-faith reality around us. There's also a multi-secular reality around us. Secular culture is extraordinarily complex and diversified. And usually in Catholic circles, we tend to badmouth the secular, but we forgot that we invented the secular. So back in the Middle Ages. So, but at any rate, secular culture is actually, in my view, one of the most profound places that God is present, and that we barely know that he exists there. If God is everywhere, if God is all in all, there is no religious or sacred and secular, as if dividing the mystery of God amongst our own worldviews. Everything is pregnant with the divinity. It's dripping wet with divinity, including the secular. And one of the ways we know that, and we Zavarians have been working on that since 2012 in a project we started called Common Ground, where we began to do dialogue work with secular humanism. We had 2 conferences for that, one in Scotland in 2013 and one at Rutgers University in New Jersey in 2015. We even had the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi there. Anyways, who's by the way is a secular Hindu. All right. So at any rate, so secular culture is very much our dialogue partners, even though many of us Catholics consider them the enemy of the faith, which to me is entirely mistaken. The second thing, along with secular culture, is science and the environment. And Pope Francis said our dialogue with science, the dialogue between faith and science, is probably one of the most important dialogues of the 21st century. And Pope Francis has been extraordinary in undertaking this dialogue. Does anybody know where it is? It's in his second encyclical. 2015, it was issued. Laudato Si. Laudato Si, like Pacem in Terris of John the 23rd, was not written merely for Catholics. It was written for all of humanity, for the religious and for the non-religious, for those who are secular and those who are religious, for everybody. Laudato Si is for everybody. And what was interesting, when it came out in 2015, I had attended the World Parliament of Religions in Toronto at that time, and this had just came out. And among Muslims, among Hindus, among Buddhists, among Jews, among many others, the talk of the conference was Pope Francis and Laudato Si. This was amazing. The United Nations also kind of applauded this attempt by the Pope to bring the church and all of humanity into dialogue around our common home together. So these are the kinds of dialogues that I'm talking about. So they're not just dialogues that are with other traditional faiths, although they certainly are, but they're also dialogues where the boundaries are much more fuzzy, much more amorphous, and hard to distinguish. So now I want to get into, this looks like a strange picture with the Imam and Pope Francis, but anyways, I'll explain that. I'm going to get into now how Pope Francis sees dialogue, creating a culture of dialogue and encounter. And I'm going to start from a document that was done in 2019 in Saudi Arabia, where Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Al-Saad, Dr. Ahmed Al-Taeb, came together on an international forum along with the President of the United Nations and others to create a pact together. And this pact, or this document, very short, between Christians and Muslims and peoples of all faiths, in particular Christians and Muslims, is called On Human Fraternity, Knowing Your Brother and Sister. And he says here, in the speech he gave there, alongside the famous ancient maxim, know yourself, we must uphold, know your brother and sister, their history, their culture, and their faith, because there is no genuine self-knowledge without the knowledge of others. Now, I want you to let that seep in a little bit. It's really hard to know what it means to be Catholic, just among Catholics. That the way we understand our Catholic identity is not only within our Catholic cultures and parish cultures and non-parochial cultures, but the way we understand our Catholic identity is the way we share our Catholic faith in our Catholic lives, our Catholic friendship, our Catholic intimacy, that we share it with peoples who do not share our faith at all. And until we do so, our identity as Catholics is fuzzy at best. Again, this is my personal opinion. I'm not sure Bishop Barron would agree with that. But anyways, I'm putting that out there. And Pope Francis brings this out in three different ways in his own writings. And I'm going to kind of glean from not only the three encyclicals, but also a few things as well as speeches that he does. I mean, I could give a whole different presentation just on this, not just, but I'm just giving a small kind of distillation in three areas. One is called Building a Culture of Encounter and Dialogue, which I just mentioned to you, that the Catholic Church, that discipleship is about that, you see. That discipleship is about building a culture of encounter and dialogue. Now, I don't know if you guys have gone to our website recently, but you'll notice we changed the title of the website. And the title of the website is called Global Catholic Encounter and Dialogue. We're not using the word mission. We're using the terminology of Pope Francis. Building a culture of encounter and dialogue. We'll get into what that's about. The second thing is dialogue as a duty for all. And what Pope Francis is doing here is unique. He's not saying just for all Catholics, but for all of humanity. That's what he's saying, okay? So it's, you know, and the second thing is that I alluded to here briefly is that dialogue is the way that we deepen our own identity. I have to tell you guys, you know, in my own work in dialogue and in my study and research and writing about it, that I am a better Christian and Catholic and a Catholic priest because of my encounters with peoples of other faiths. I am so grateful for my Muslim friendships, for my Hindu and Buddhist friendships, and for many other types of friendships that are out there that have shaped me, that have challenged me to articulate who I say I am in front of their world and their beliefs, you see. Okay. This picture here, by the way, is a picture of us in Grafton at the Buddhist temple there. And from our multi-faith collaborative in Framingham, we had a program where we're bringing people to different places of worship and having a dialogue, if you will, in those places. And here we were in a Buddhist monastery. These guys, they're wonderful guys from Sri Lanka, and they're Sri Lankan Buddhists. And at any rate, and you'll see Jessica's right there. You see Jess? Hi, Jess. So Jess has been very involved in dialogue work as well. And this is Reverend Debbie Clark from the UCC Church in Framingham. And these are other folks. This is Rabbi Mattia, and there's George, who's a church scientist, and so on. So at any rate, we had gathered here, and in this building of a culture of encounter and dialogue, this is the proposal Francis makes: a culture of closeness. If you want to call it something else, call it a culture of closeness, a culture of friendship, a culture of intimacy. Isolation and withdrawing into one's own interests are never the way to restore hope and bring about a renewal. A direct challenge to the divisions our communities face today. Rather, it is closeness. It is the culture of encounter, he says. In fact, Pope Francis views the grace of God that Christians experience in Jesus Christ, who is also nurturing the life of people who follow other religious paths. That's why he believes that Christians can learn from other traditions. He says, I urgently appeal for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet. We need a conversation which includes everyone. And that's from Laudato Si. Now, in light of that, we're just where we're up to now, how would you assess how we Catholics are moving in our discipleship in our multi-religious, multi-secular communities? You don't need to say anything right now, but I'd be interested in your thoughts afterwards. How would you assess where we are with that? Your parish. The other thing is, and this is very new, by the way, this is a picture of upstairs in our meeting room. And here we are having interfaith scripture study, the last one before COVID. So we had quite a mixture here, about 20 people. And I took this picture, but there were Christians of different stripes here, a couple Catholics here. This is also a Catholic priest. Oh, Jessica's right here too, wow. And our brother from our Sikh community was there. We had two actually from the Sikh community, City Khanum here, and also, I forgot his name now, from the Episcopal Church, and some other folks. At any rate, we were delving into each other's scriptures there. So dialogue is a duty for all, he says. The fourth section of the Joy of the Gospel opens with a strong statement voicing Pope Francis's firm conviction that interreligious dialogue is a necessary condition for peace in the world. And so it is the duty for Christians as well as other religious communities, which, as I mentioned, it was something new. I don't think any religious leader ever said that about ever, including all of our popes, that they would somehow suggest that what the duties of others are. Certainly, we're not suggesting what other people should believe or not believe, but what we are suggesting is our common humanity and our common need to come together beyond our isolation and our withdrawal. And finally, I wanted to get into this. This is something that's very much marks his. I'm going to have to finish. I'll finish real soon. Something that's going to that marks his ideas of and mine, to be quite honest, and interreligious dialogue very much, and that's incomplete thinking, empathy, and mercy. This picture was taken when we had in Connecticut, and we had an interreligious program going on there between the Muslim and Christian communities. There's a large mosque down there. At any rate, incomplete thinking for Pope Francis is an attitude that calls for horizon which cannot be reached. That dialogue is not going to give us all the answers. That it might even bring up more questions. That we are searching together. We're not convincing each other as if each of us were the sole proprietor of the truth. We're searching together for a new discovery. We're open to something new between us. This same time, and we are kind of restless in front of the inner abyss, he calls it. I call it spiritual curiosity. And that, to me, should be a mark of discipleship. That we are curious about the mystery of Christ that is beyond anything we know. And where we find it expressed in different ways and in the realities all around us. He says it is necessary to know the other's religion or culture by penetrating the sense of what it means to be for that other. That for Catholics, it's important for us to know what it means to be a Hindu, or a Muslim, or a Buddhist, or a disaffiliated Catholic. It's a matter of looking at the world from another point of view. Discipleship and dialogue. Our relationship is an interconnected relationship to our fellow human beings and to our environment. That it's not just about humanity, that all creation, all the cosmos, and all of humanity within it is one living organism, and that we all depend on everything. So he says, connecting with our fellow human beings and to our environment, to reach the Most High, we must go through empathies, the pain and the suffering of people, as well as the joy and the happiness of his creation around us. The pain and the suffering of the environment, which he talks about is really the expression of our own sinfulness in Laudato Si. So, in summary, by the way, that's a picture of me at the Sikh temple. I like that hat. With Rabbi Jennifer Rudin and one of the Sikh ministers, Siddhi Kadam. So, in fact, we were being honored there, and this stole was given to us as an emblem of honor from the Sikh community. At any rate, in summary, I just want to say this, and then we'll open it up for conversations. Discipleship is specific, it's local, it's closely felt in the needs of our community around us. We can only encounter and respond to those needs in dialogue. And for Pope Francis, a succinct way to understand this dialogue is creating a culture of encounter and dialogue. That culture of dialogue is the duty of everyone. And that spiritual curiosity and empathy are key values in this dialogue. So I'm just going to leave it there. I know there's a lot of stuff, guys. I probably completely mystified. I don't know what happened. Anyways, I hope you're okay. I'm trained in CPR if you need it, okay? At any rate, I'd just like to open it up if you'd like, if any questions or concerns or comments. I'm gonna keep this summary up, by the way.
Oh.
So it's just speak up rather than raising your hand, because I can't see everybody. Just speak up. Don't be shy.
I'll start. I have to say, and I believe in all of this, but I went back to my own beginnings in Norwood, and we had 14 churches and 2 synagogues, and not all the churches. Yeah, well, we had 14 Christian churches, we had 4 Catholic churches, but we were really taught as kids not to dialogue, not to even engage.
Right.
Right.
And
Right.
so even though I buy into all of this, there's something in me that tugs saying, but once upon a time, so we've come a long way. And those of us who are engaged in this and who are kind of, up to date with what Pope Francis has been saying and what the council said, I think the challenge is really to bring our fellow Catholics along, because I think they may be as mired as I was as a younger person, because that was my experience, and yeah, it's challenging.
Yes, it certainly is. And it's interesting that there was an attempt to change mentalities back in the early 60s. Of course, it's a document, right?
Right.
And then you have to somehow make it alive in people's lives down the line. And here we are, almost 60 years later, still struggling in a sense with the challenges of Vatican II. And in some ways, perhaps even gone backwards.
Right.
So
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, we have in some ways gone backwards. The times of Vatican II for me, as a teenager, young adults, were exciting. I thought big things were going to be happening in the church, and for a while they seemed to, but then it seemed to start slowly but surely shutting down again, which I found difficult to deal with. But I'm very struck here by dialogue being the duty of all people, and that I don't have to be like a Zavarian priest, a missionary. I don't have to be going somewhere and doing some grand thing. This dialogue is right here, right now, starting with my family and starting with the clerk at the grocery store and whoever I'm encountering and whatever I'm encountering. And I think that that's exciting. I think that's exciting.
Right. And I think what's happening in Metro West is exciting. I mean,
Yes.
what you all do is just amazing. But is it happening other places? I mean, you talked about, what is happening in your home parishes, and my home parish isn't doing anything like this. You know, so it's happening in Metro West. Where
Yeah.
else, where else, you know?
Yeah.
And like Father Rocco said, we were brought up that you didn't do this. And now, yes, we do this. This is our calling. This is
Yeah.
what we need to be doing
Yeah.
Right.
more of.
The need to do this on parishes actually came out quite a long time ago by John Paul II in the early 1980s, about 83, something like that. And they had put together guidelines at that time for Catholics on how to dialogue, if you will, or what does it mean to dialogue, or what's the difference between dialogue and proclaiming Christ. So do we preach about Christ? Do we try to get people to come to the church, and or do we
Listen.
dialogue? That kind
We
of
need
thing.
to listen. We need to listen
Yeah.
and hear. We need to hear and we need to see these other people.
Right.
And
That's
for
right,
that-
Diane. We need to see. We need to see.
Yep.
Jack,
The-
you mentioned, did I remember 64? That's the year my husband and I were married.
Oh,
And we had been brought up in a very parochial setting and went to Catholic school, and we met at Fordham at a summer school of Catholic Action. Although we were in the same school, we didn't meet until our fidelity went to New York. And we were 16 at that point. So time goes by and we moved to Ashland and we became very involved in St. Cecilia's. We had a Catholic family movement, Christian family movement. And one of our observe, judge, and act, the men got together with the Protestant minister at the Federated Church, and they would do breakfast once every other week. And they do it before they went to work. And that was unheard of. And I can remember talking to some of the parishioners that just didn't understand it. And this is after the Vatican Council, but still people didn't understand it. And as the years went on, we were doing a lot of different things, and the pastors of the church weren't all that in favor of it. So you kind of, I am just so happy with Pope Francis because
Mhm.
that's the way I want to live, and it's very refreshing. But as Father Rocco said, we were brought up in a very different fashion, and we have to respect how people feel. It's a big, I just love the way you put it all together here tonight. I just love it. I've got a lot to think about. Thank you.
by the way, if anybody wants this, I can email it to you, the presentation.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
It is being
Father, I
recorded,
think
so you
this
can
is-
always see
It's
it.
being recorded as well, yeah.
Okay.
I think Anne Tiago wanted to say a word.
Yeah, I've always had a hunger for this. I was so excited when Vatican II came along, and I realized that it was not just my call, but it was pretty much my duty to think
Mhm.
beyond the box, keeping God in a box. And I think that I worry about our own Catholic Church, because I don't think we even have a proper dialogue between those who are very pro-hierarchical. I don't want to say black-white thinking, but it kind of goes into that way. And those who wish to listen, to be excited, to see new possibilities of relationship, because relationship is so foundational. How do we dialogue with those who don't see relationship as being that important? It's more about following rules.
Mhm.
Any thoughts, anybody?
Mm.
From the kernels of your wisdom? And your Catholic experience?
I sort of try not to talk too much about it, and just, it's sort of like politics. It's better left unsaid. And I try to just meet people in a different level, and I'm just trying to just love people and not get into debates. It's a chicken's way out, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to cope with it somehow, in the way that makes sense to you, right? So it's no chicken's way at all. It's,
Thank you.
yeah, not at all, not at all.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
it's seeking out what I need versus looking to someone to give it to me. It's
Right.
it's my responsibility to reach out and to dialogue. I am not going to rely on somebody to kind of bring me to it. I need to take the responsibility.
Right.
Because as you said, we seem like we're going backwards after Second Vatican, and looking for our leaders. And like you said, and the hierarchy, I can't look to the hierarchy. I need to look to me and take that responsibility.
Yeah, and I think too, Anne, and I've seen you do this, Anne. It's you work within the institution, within the tradition of the hierarchy, but seeing and listening and responding to the horizontal plane as opposed to the vertical hierarchy plane. And we can talk about our beliefs without preaching them. We can live them. And like I said, I can remember when you taught CCD, Ann, that's what you did. That's what you did when you were teaching. You were talking to the horizontal, not the vertical. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I think that we have to work within the institution, but make sure that we're dialoguing, I don't want to say in the appropriate way, but that we're living and dialoguing a universal concept.
Yeah.
I like that universal concept, because when we think of the cross, we think of vertical and we think of horizontal. And I think that we were taught to assume that we were the only ones who had the right vertical.
Yeah.
And I don't think we even considered finding out what other people believe, because we were told our church is the one true holy
Right.
Catholic church. That's it.
Right.
And I think it kind of runs against our grain to question, and to broaden, and not to be afraid to grow. I think that growth is so important, and you don't grow if you don't nurture yourself. All of the good health, spiritual health things that you need.
Yeah.
Yep. If you're not curious, like Father, curiosity is a big part of it too.
Right.
We should go back to being kids when we always ask,
Yes.
why?
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Did we lose Carl?
Yep. Yeah.
Because I'm underneath his room and I could hear him talking, but I don't see him on the line. Oh, there you go.
There you are.
I switched. I had to go to the other panel.
Oh,
That's
well, we
why.
lost you.
Oh, okay. I think I was always here.
Right. But we couldn't hear you.
You couldn't hear me?
No.
I could hear you, but they
And
couldn't.
now.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I think my earplug thing was off. And anyways, there's another quote, and I think it comes from Benedict actually, that is that we do not possess the truth. The truth
Mhm.
possesses us.
That's great.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to think about it, which is very different from our past, isn't it?
Mhm.
You know,
Yep.
but the shifts, rather than en masse parishes and churches making this shift, working in small communities and groups worldwide, I have to tell you that interfaith work is huge, and it's going on everywhere in this country. It's one of the most fantastic things, coast to coast. There's interfaith everywhere. And it's very hopeful, I think. Now, the question for us Catholics is, how do we get on board? How do we engage with it as well? So just a reminder, and also maybe a plug for our Metro West Interfaith Dialogue Project and our Multi-Faith Collaborative. If you ever want to join us in any of our interfaith programs, we have one coming up May 1st. And it's going to be a panel because April is a very significant time this year where Ramadan, Passover, and Easter all come together around the same time almost, as well as the Hindu feast of called the Rama Festival and the Rai Vakai feast of the Sikhs, which, by the way, commemorates the National Day of Sikhs in the United States that was set up by Congress, April 14th. So anyways, we're going to have a panel of all of these folks that are going to talk about their different holy days and how we converge together with these holy days, the kind of sacred convergence. So that's May 1st. I'm giving a promotion right away.
Mhm.
And is there a link to that? Or is it interfaith or in person?
It's going to be on Zoom.
Okay,
And there's no link yet, but they'll come out soon.
Okay.
thank you.
Any closing thoughts?
No.
If not, I'd like to thank everybody for, again, being with us. And next week, we're going to be welcoming Pat Deneen, who is the designated hitter for the Archdiocese for social concerns. She had been chairing the Social Justice Committee of the Archdiocesan Pastoral Council. She was really promoting the annual Social Justice Convocation, which still happens. It happened on Zoom for the past 2 years, but Cardinal Sean 2 years ago did establish an official office for social concerns at the Pastoral Center, and Pat is the coordinator. And then in 2 weeks, on the 25th, we'll be welcoming Pat Ferrone. She's my colleague in crime for Pax Christi. We're the 2 coordinators for the state. And she has a powerful parish group at St. Susanna's that does amazing work and has also put together an amazing adult formation program with over 400 encounters over the past number of years, really bringing social justice concerns alive to the people of St. Susanna. So again, this is recorded and you'll be able to again visit this on our Facebook page, both for the Xaverian Missionaries and for Our Lady of Fatima Shrine. So to each and every one of you, have a wonderful evening and a holy, holy week and a very happy Easter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Same
you.
to you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.